On a sweltering Sunday afternoon in Phoenix, Magi was standing at her parents' front door. The dry desert wind whipped her shoulder-length brown hair as she wiped the sweat from her forehead. She gripped the bottle of wine she brought for the weekly family dinner and sighed deeply before ringing the doorbell. Her parents' house maintained its imposing presence amongst the perfectly aligned palm trees in the exclusive Paradise Valley neighborhood. When her mother, Susan, opened the door, she looked impeccable. Perfect makeup, elegant dress, as if posing for a social media photo. Behind her, the enormous windows offered a view of the desert-landscaped garden. "You're late. Everyone has been waiting for you. Ami and her family are already here," her mother said in a neutral tone. Magi forced a smile and mumbled an apology, slipping off her shoes and stepping into the living room. The Persian rug felt soft under her feet, and the walls were covered with Walker family photos. Her parents' wedding, Magi and her sister Ami's graduations, Ami's wedding, and a meticulous chronology of her niece Sarah's growth, from baby to present day. In every picture, the smiles seemed to portray a perfect family. Everything was carefully arranged like an Instagram feed. Ami greeted her from the enormous white leather sofa, holding her 8-year-old daughter Sarah. Beside them, Greg, her husband, wore his usual expensive polo shirt and had his hair perfectly styled, which felt somewhat out of place for a relaxing Sunday. "Hey Mag," her father, David, greeted, glancing up briefly from his newspaper and nodding slightly. Even in retirement, he maintained his professorial demeanor, observing his daughter over his reading glasses. Ami started going to a new yoga studio, her mother commented enthusiastically, serving iced tea in an expensive glass, monopolizing the conversation with community gossip. The instructor used to train celebrities in Hollywood. The monthly fee is a bit high, but it's perfect for Ami. "Indeed," her father interjected, carefully folding the newspaper. "Our youngest daughter is very ambitious, dedicated to her family and the community. Never misses a church event." Magi sipped her wine silently, observing her distorted reflection swirling in the dark red liquid. Her recent promotion at the accounting firm and her success with a major client went unmentioned. Her accomplishments were as invisible as the air in that house. "Hey Ami," her mother suddenly changed the subject, delicately combing Sarah's hair. She displayed a calculated smile. "Remember that trip to Mexico we talked about?" Magi froze. The trip they joked about last month? She never thought they were serious. She carefully swallowed the words caught in her throat. "You promised to pay for us all," Ami said casually. "The whole family is going to Cancun." She said it as if it were an inevitable conclusion, her tone laced with confident victory. "An all-inclusive resort would be perfect," her mother chimed in immediately, settling into the expensive sofa with a dreamy expression. "David, don't forget your golf clubs. I heard the courses there are wonderful." "Wait a minute," Magi tried to say, feeling a cold sweat forming on her forehead. "Ami, a promise is a promise." Ami's voice held a subtle hint of pressure. "Sarah's looking forward to it, aren't you, my love?" Ami looked at her daughter, who smiled innocently. That smile tugged at Magi's heart. She looked down at her glass of red wine, sighing inwardly. The expectations, the family pressure, and the hopeful look of her 8-year-old niece made her waver. Finally, she nodded slowly, knowing this trip would cost her a significant portion of her savings. "Okay." The next morning, Phoenix awoke earlier than usual. At 7 a.m., the Walker family gathered on the terrace of the popular Morning Glory restaurant. It was Susan's idea to choose the less crowded terrace to avoid the heat. The tables were impeccably arranged, as if ready for a photo shoot. The windows shimmered with the morning sun, but the air was still cool. The aroma of eggs Benedict, prepared by expert chefs, filled the air. "Ami, did you remember to bring your passport?" Susan asked in an exaggerated tone of concern. "I almost forgot mine once." "Yes, it's fine," Magi replied wearily. Unable to sleep due to anxiety, she had checked her luggage 3 times the night before. Her passport was safely tucked away in her expensive leather bag. "Oh, that new bag is beautiful," her mother commented, eyeing it with interest. "I need to use the restroom," Magi said, standing up. Her morning coffee was taking effect. "You can leave your bag here. No one is going to take it," her mother said calmly. Magi didn't give it a second thought and left her bag on the table before heading inside. Security cameras coldly recorded what happened next. Susan elegantly sipped her coffee and casually glanced around. Then, with the same delicacy she used to arrange the tablecloth at her dinner parties, she reached into Magi's bag and removed the passport. In less than 10 seconds, she slipped it into her own bag without blinking. Ami gave a slight smile at the scene. David, meanwhile, kept his eyes fixed on the newspaper, pretending not to notice anything. Only 8-year-old Sarah tilted her head, confused by her grandmother's actions. Perhaps she should have ordered the buttermilk pancakes. When Magi returned to the table, her mother was casually examining the menu as if nothing had happened. On the way to the airport, Magi felt uneasy. The family conversation seemed strangely superficial. Her mother and Ami were being unusually friendly, but she couldn't understand why. Something in the air made her restless. Arriving at Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, the family lined up at security. "Passport, please," the agent requested. Magi reached into her bag, searching calmly. But as the seconds ticked by, her movements became more frantic. Wallet, cell phone, makeup. But the passport that should have been there was gone. Just a moment. Her voice began to tremble. She rummaged through the bottom of the bag, but the blue cover of the passport was nowhere to be found. "What's wrong?" her mother asked, a hint of amusement in her voice. "My passport. I can't find it," Magi replied, feeling the blood drain from her face. "Oh no. You don't have it." Her mother covered her mouth with feigned surprise. "Well, then you can't come, can you?" Ami let out a laugh. "Ami, how careless." Her father just snorted. "Well, that's that. We'll go ahead," her mother said to the people around them as if nothing had happened. "Wait." Magi's voice echoed in the airport lobby. "We're going with just the real family," her mother replied coldly before turning away. The backs of her family receded toward the gate. The cheerful laughter of her mother and Ami, the indifference of her father. Only Sarah looked anxiously at Magi before disappearing into the crowd. Magi would never forget that scene. She stood frozen amidst the bustle of the airport. In her mind, the events of the morning at the restaurant replayed like a movie. Her mother's behavior, Ami's forced smile, her father's hidden expression behind the newspaper. It had all been planned. Her hands trembled with anger, sadness, or fear, she wasn't sure. But her eyes began to regain their composure. Her rational accountant side was slowly awakening. Her cell phone had recorded the entire morning conversation, and surely the restaurant's security cameras had captured the truth as well. "Let's end this," she whispered softly. The light streaming through the airport windows illuminated her resolve. After leaving the airport, her first stop was the Morning Glory. She parked her car among the luxury SUVs and looked at herself in the rearview mirror. Her puffy eyes betrayed her sleepless night. 11 a.m. The restaurant was in that lull between breakfast and lunch service, with only a few customers inside. "Is the manager available?" she asked, her voice surprisingly calm. Her professional mindset as an accountant accustomed to negotiating with large corporations was working perfectly. "You called for me?" A woman approached. Janet Morrison, the manager, appeared with a warm smile, but her eyes reflected the cunning developed through years in the service industry. "I would like to review the security camera recordings regarding a theft that occurred here around 7 a.m. Magi explained the situation, hinting at possible police intervention and emphasizing the seriousness of passport theft. Janet's expression changed. "Without a court order, the security recordings. My mother stole my passport," Magi's voice trembled slightly, "and now my family is on their way to Cancun without me." Janet's eyes widened. Her surprise increased upon hearing the name Walker, a family well known in Paradise Valley. "Please wait a moment." In the monitoring room, the morning's footage unfolded clearly on the bluish screen. "Could you save this material for me?" Magi requested calmly. She took a photo of the screen with her cell phone and carefully noted the times and circumstances. Janet nodded silently. The next destination, the local police station. Magi filed a request to preserve the evidence and reported the incident. "I also have audio recordings," she said, pulling out her cell phone. "The conversations during breakfast, the events at the airport, everything is recorded." She took a deep breath before adding, Also, let's make sure the passport theft. Methodically, she presented each piece of evidence. When is your family returning? In a week. Officer Thompson took careful notes. Passport theft is a serious crime, especially when it involves international travel. I understand, Magi replied firmly. But when I think of my niece, Sarah. Officer Thompson noticed her expression. We'll handle this discreetly. Let's plan this well for their return. Police patrols, security details in the neighborhood, even the possible media response. The most important thing now was how to use the time until her family returned. Magi nodded deeply and left the station. She headed to the Ritz-Carlton in Phoenix. Returning home would only mean a barrage of calls from her parents, and the last thing she wanted was to deal with them. She needed distance. From the balcony of her top-floor suite, she observed the Phoenix cityscape. The sunset painted the desert a deep red. Magi turned on her laptop and checked her emails. There it was, a message from her mother. My dear daughter, I just wanted you to reflect a little. You always put family last. The sound of the delete button echoed in the room. On her cell phone, 20 unread messages from her sister. She deleted them all without opening them. Let's end this. Pouring herself a whiskey, Magi began to refine her plan. Legal preparations, financial arrangements, new job opportunities. All for 1 week from now. The crimson sun disappeared below the horizon. She knew the next week would be long, but there were no more doubts. For the first time in her life, she was about to be completely free. In the distance, the lights of planes landing at the airport flashed in the darkness. Silently, a full moon illuminated the night sky over Phoenix. The clear desert air made the moonlight stand out with an almost surreal clarity. It was 11 p.m. The exclusive neighborhood of Paradise Valley was steeped in an unnatural silence. 2 patrol cars, lights off, waited in front of her parents' house. In several nearby houses, lights were still on. Through the windows, silhouettes could be seen moving. Gossiping neighbors held their breath, anxious not to miss what was about to happen in the Walker's garden. The meticulously manicured desert plants cast shadows under the moonlight. Magi used to play in that garden as a child, but now those memories felt like part of another life, an echo of a past that no longer belonged to her. In the patrol car, Officer Thompson made the final confirmations by radio. His voice, serene but charged with experience, reflected the countless family conflicts he had witnessed throughout his career. In the back seat of the police car, Magi let out a deep sigh. The events of the last week replayed in her mind like a movie. Solitary nights in a luxury hotel, the city lights seen from above, the endless stream of messages from her family full of ridiculous excuses and false apologies. All a cheap theatrics. For an instant, her face tightened, but seeing her reflection in the rearview mirror, she took a deep breath and regained her composure. Miss Walker, Officer Thompson's voice filled the car. The taxi has crossed the city limits as planned. They will enter through the main door. Magi nodded silently. Her stay at the hotel had restored her mental clarity. She adjusted the collar of her navy blue suit and checked her makeup in a small pocket mirror. Her impeccable appearance was her armor, and her pride as an accountant backed her up at that moment. Ready? Officer Thompson asked with almost maternal kindness. In his 30 years of service, he had surely witnessed many family confrontations like this. Of course, Magi replied, with a firmness that surprised even her. Years of endurance and abuse were about to come to an end that very night. In the distance, the taxi's headlights appeared among the trees, creating a play of light and shadow on the street. The clock struck 11:15 p.m. I'll make the first contact, Thompson reported by radio. This could be resolved as a civil matter. Minimal intervention. Pay special attention to the psychological effects on the minor. The taxi stopped in front of the house. The sound of the tires on the gravel broke the silence. Ami was the first to get out of the car. Her designer dress and tan skin screamed luxury. Her hair was perfectly styled, her nails impeccable. A facade of elegance. Then Susan, her mother, emerged. Despite the impeccable makeup, there was a trace of fatigue on her face. She carried an expensive travel bag on her shoulder and maintained the same dignified expression as always, but her eyes darted nervously, scanning the surroundings. David, her father, opened the trunk and began unloading the luggage in silence. The former professor's meticulousness was reflected in the way he arranged the suitcases, but his hands trembled noticeably. Finally, 8-year-old Sarah got out of the taxi with an innocent smile. She was wearing a Disneyland t-shirt, an absurd contrast to the tension hanging in the air. Magi watched her intently. That little girl didn't deserve to be involved in this, but it was too late. Sarah clutched a stuffed animal against her chest, clinging to the only comfort she had left. In her innocence, she didn't understand the whirlwind of emotions that enveloped the adults around her. Mr. and Mrs. Walker. Officer Thompson's firm voice broke the silence of the night. Under the moonlight, the silhouette of the uniformed policeman became visible. Susan's face froze in a mask of disbelief. The blood seemed to drain from her impeccably made-up face. "What's going on?" David asked, his voice tense. The dignity of his former role as a teacher had vanished in an instant. "We'd like to talk to you about a case of passport theft." The color completely disappeared from Susan's face. Her trembling hands went to her expensive handbag. Magi emerged from the police car with a firm step. The moonlight highlighted her elegant and serene demeanor. She had decided to face this moment with her head held high, freeing herself from years of oppression. "Let's talk inside," she said, her voice devoid of any trace of doubt. Inside the house, the family sat on the luxurious leather sofa, the same one that had witnessed countless moments of apparent family harmony. But now it served as the stage for what was about to unfold. On the enormous television screen, the security camera footage began to play. There it was, the exact moment when her mother's hand removed Magi's passport with a calculated and natural movement. Ami's complicit smile, laden with years of accumulated jealousy. The deliberate indifference of her father, taking refuge behind his newspaper as if nothing were happening. It was all recorded. "This is..." Susan's voice trembled. Her elegant scarf moved with a slight tremor at her neck. Officer Thompson turned on another recording, this time from Magi's phone. The voices at the airport resonated with chilling clarity. "We're going with just the real family." The weight of those words fell upon the room like a concrete slab. Susan's voice, which until a moment ago sounded haughty and controlling, now sounded cruel and ruthless. Ami burst into tears. Her perfect makeup ran in black lines down her cheeks. "Always. Always Magi being the perfect one. I was always second best." Her voice was charged with resentment. Years of repressed jealousy finally exploded. David simply sank into the armchair, staring blankly at the ceiling. His pride as a teacher, his dignity as head of the family, everything was crumbling. Behind his reading glasses, his eyes wandered aimlessly. "I just wanted you to reflect," Susan whispered, her voice barely audible. "You always look down on us. Always working." She tried to justify herself. Magi looked at her coldly. Who looked down on whom? The question hung in the air. No one dared to answer. The balance of power within the family had been broken in an instant. Sarah, still clutching her stuffed animal, clung anxiously to her mother. "Mommy, what's wrong? Why is Grandma crying?" The girl's innocent words made the moment even more unbearable. Ami couldn't even hug her daughter. She just kept crying, covering her face with her perfectly manicured hands. The shadows of the cacti stretched long and motionless across the earth. This was the beginning of the end, and the beginning of a new life. In the silence of midnight, only the sound of rustling documents broke the stillness. The moon relentlessly illuminated the final moments of that family. 3 months later, twilight enveloped Phoenix with its usual beauty. But in Magi's eyes, the landscape had completely changed. The legal settlement was signed. Surprisingly, the outcome had come faster than she imagined. Despite the seriousness of the crime, prosecutors decided not to press charges against Susan, largely thanks to Magi herself asking for leniency. As part of the agreement, her mother transferred $5 million to her account. It was money meant to sever all ties between them. But there were things money couldn't fix. Her parents were forced to abandon their luxurious life in Paradise Valley. Rumors spread like wildfire on social media. Losing their place within the church community, they made the decision to move to a small suburb. The social circles her mother so valued crumbled completely. Her father David's pride as a former teacher was also shattered. He resigned from all his honorary positions on the local school board. Although the newspapers never revealed names, the scandal of a respected family made headlines. David's former students publicly expressed their disappointment. Reading their words pushed him further into despair. Ami's life also took a drastic turn. She began psychiatric treatment 3 times a week. Therapy forced her to confront the resentment and envy she had felt for her sister all her life. Her facade of luxurious living collapsed. She canceled her membership at the exclusive yoga studio, stopped posting on social media, and her husband, Greg, upon discovering his wife's true nature, began to seriously consider divorce. His reputation in the real estate sector plummeted. His income crashed. The lifestyle of appearances and ostentation to which he clung was coming to an end. But the most heartbreaking was what happened to Sarah. At just 8 years old, she had to face the discord between her parents and her mother's emotional instability. Her paternal grandparents took her in temporarily, but tranquility did not come there either. The conflicts between the adults left deep scars on her little heart. Meanwhile, Magi made a big decision. She resigned from her job at the Phoenix accounting firm and accepted an offer as a director at a major company in Chicago. It was a new beginning. Life in the new city turned out to be more pleasant than she imagined. From her apartment in a skyscraper, she had a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan, a completely different kind of freedom than the Phoenix desert. She continued with psychological therapy. "I just want to be loved." The words of her therapist occasionally crossed her mind. But it wasn't all darkness. She still had video calls with Sarah. "Auntie, when will I see you again? Will you come to Chicago?" the girl would ask with a hopeful smile. "Of course," Magi would reply tenderly. "Auntie will come see you whenever you want." In her new job, her skills were fully recognized. A promotion was just around the corner. Moving away from the family chains allowed her to discover her true potential. Walking along the shore of Lake Michigan became her weekend ritual. Seeing the sun reflecting on the surface of the water, she sometimes remembered the days in Phoenix. Until one day she received a letter. It was from Sarah. The childish handwriting overflowed with pure affection. "Dear Auntie, Mommy is still not well, but I want to be strong like you. So please wait for me. Someday when I grow up." Magi held the letter against her chest. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But they weren't tears of regret. From her balcony, she contemplated the city lights. The Chicago wind gently caressed her hair. "So this is what it's like to be truly free," she whispered, her voice laced with pride. Tomorrow would be another day. A life truly hers without being tied to anyone. The moonlight reflected on the surface of the lake, rippling gently as if blessing the beginning of her new life. Everything had ended and everything had just begun. The future in Magi's eyes had never shone so brightly.